you very much. Thank you so much, Agriar. Yes, a lot of lovely comments. We can move on to the next presenter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Peter, you would like to go ahead?
Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can.
That's great. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward very much to explaining this concept to you. From sunny England, unusually we have a lot of sunshine at the moment, so if I'm suddenly blinded by the light, you'll understand the reason why. I've chosen to approach this less with text, as with images, diagrams, and pictures. So it may seem a little bit unusual to you that I'm doing this, but I'll talk you through what I mean by each of the images that I'm showing you. And I've also chosen to subtitle this presentation as Chaodynamics and Lingua Management. And these are potentially concepts that you wouldn't be aware of or may be slightly new to you. So I'm hoping to get through as many slides as I can and develop your awareness and understanding of what this is in the time that's available. One of the things then to say, and in a way it follows on from what Shahar was just saying, but it approaches it from a different angle, is that, this is not goal theory coaching. This does not use a linear approach. It moves away from what we know as management by objectives. We're not looking for an objective and attempting to reach an objective. What we're thinking of with this is a dynamic system which relies on self-regulation and relies on self-mastery. And the idea of self-mastery is important in the kind of world that we now live in. We live in what's been termed the VUCA world, a world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And while, of course, it's true that the world has always been rather volatile and uncertain, it's becoming increasingly complex and much more ambiguous than it used to be. So by moving beyond specific goals and specific management by objectives, I'm introducing here something which is slightly original, I think you may find. In other words, this idea of chaodynamics. And this is not chaos theory as such, but a kind of meta-systemic approach to what's going on in a person's own life, what's going on within their team or their organization, and within their wider social context. So being able to understand this implies stepping back from the chaotic world in which we live and looking for a sort of generative approach that the coach can help to bring forward with his or her work. So this is something also that embraces negatives as an emergent opportunity and an opportunity for serendipity in life and work. What we need to think of when we're thinking of this approach is that systems are energy rich, and where in the past we've talked about, let's say, emotions or body language or the way that we communicate, how we use models to influence others and to coach others, the way I'm looking at this now is that this is a lot of data that gives us feedback, but often there's too much data. And when there's too much data, the system tends to collapse. And this then causes problems for everybody concerned. So what I'll just say before we move on to the next slide is that, of course, I coach goal-oriented methods as well, but I've found that with many people now, at all kinds of levels, that they're living in a destabilized world. And what they learn within their coaching models, they often forget when it comes to the crunch. And this can be very painful for them when things go wrong. And however non-judgmental we are, or however uncritical we are, having a model to follow doesn't always answer the questions that are deeper and that need to be resolved at a meta-systemic level. One person I'll be quoting, and there are a few, and perhaps I can also at this point just bring up a recent book that I was dipping into. It actually goes back to 2013, but it's because Chao was mentioning David Clutterbuck. There's this book, Beyond Goals, which I hope that you'll be able to see clearly in the camera there. Because in a way, by moving beyond goals, what we're doing is allowing a different kind of mentation process to take over. And Paul Linden, who's one of the embodied coaches that I have worked with, has said, our body is not just a cart that carries our head around in it. We can't separate the different parts of our cellular being any more than we can separate that being from the being that we work with in a team or in an organization. All of these things are connected. And what happens when the delicate relationship between our being and the being of others and of the team and the organization and society is thrown out of kilter is that people suffer terribly in terms of destabilization, agitated states, demotivation, disempowerment, sickness, absence from work, and all of these other rather awful things. So if you could move on to the next slide, please, Aletta, which I think should be the circular one. I'm having difficulty. Can you? I hope you can all still hear me because I'm still stuck on the slide before.
Yes, we can hear you.
I can see this, your slide, on my second slide, language balance, poise and embodiment. But could we see the next one, please?
We can see the one with the circle and the
Now I
yellow.
can't see that, so that's fine. As long as I know which one you're showing, I'll be able to see it on another screen here on my computer. That's fine. So slide number 3. Well, theories of social change and their impact are not widely recognized as part of coaching philosophy, but they are part of the entire world that we live in. And when we have things bombarding our consciousness, whether through the media or through our leadership structure or through our family lives, politics and so on, what tends to happen is that we receive a subliminal message that lead to feelings of being trapped and powerless. How do we regain that power? And that image that you see in front of you of thesis, antithesis, crisis and synthesis is one that's been widely recognized for hundreds of years as being how we change things. We bring in opposing points of view. This creates a stimulus for discussion. It's the famous Hegelian dialectic. But we see this at work in the world and in our own lives, and also in a biological sense, it affects us physically. So the workshops that I organize are aimed to demonstrate how life is elegant and non-linear. Time is not necessarily something that drives us forward towards goals. We can change our aspect, we can completely readjust our perspective on things in personal and team and organizational sense to find out what really matters. So please move on to the next slide. The embodied impact of change and how we perceive other people. One of the things that's been talked about in coaching for quite a few years now is entering a gamma state of awareness, super awareness, being hyper-performant and being able to juggle many things all at once. But the problem with this approach with our coaching methods is that it just adds more data into a delicate and easily unbalanced system. And when this happens, we enter a very changed embodied state where we perceive other people as aggressors and we perceive ourselves as victims. And the trouble is that the people who are at the top of the chain, if you like, also consider themselves to be victims. and might imagine that their team are somehow against them or somehow resisting what they are hoping to achieve. So, unfortunately, this also happens through language. And the idea of lingua management or language management is that whatever words we use, they tend to be interpreted according to their force and the emotional content that comes with them, or is part of the whole energetic system that's around us. The problem or the danger then is that as coaches, we can be adding to this overrich energy source, and we can be snuffing out the very lightly lit candle that the person is trying to keep alive. So some things then that we could be thinking of within the embodied process is our agility and how we work within a 4 or 5 dimensional world. And as an embodied coach, what I do in my workshops, and this can be done remotely as well as in the workshop environment, is look at people and help them to see themselves in the space that they occupy, whether that's in the sort of vertical stance, the way that they present themselves, how they pivot and poise, how they get closer or further away from other people, how they connect or disconnect, and how they use time. Are they spending time to process and compose themselves, or are they working in a rushed and hyperactive way in a world that they are unable to control? And one of the things that combines these aspects is the way that we use our voice. By combining the pitch, the tempo, the rhythm, and the emphasis that we use in an embodied way, we can convey the meaning of what we want to truly impact far more successfully. Next slide, please. So, as you might not be familiar with this concept of chaodynamics, chaodynamics is something that was developed by possibly someone you wouldn't have heard of, Ilya Prigozhin, who was a count and Nobel laureate and professor at the University of Texas. He died in 2003. He was born in 1917. And he developed the idea in physics of dissipative structures. Dissipative structures are coherent space-time structures that could be at the biological level, the cellular level, or at the individual level, or at the organic interrelationship level, or at the organizational level. Any kind of business, for example, or society or political system are all coherent space-time systems. And these are dissipative in the sense that there is always an exchange of energy and matter between each cell and its external environment. In order to maintain their function and to withstand destabilization and to collapse, he developed an idea of communication in a concentric approach across these systems when there is external pressure. And so, of course, you may have questions about this man, or I would invite you to look up information about him. But if you could move on to the next slide, please. So to put it into a more realistic context, chaodynamics is based around the notion that there is a tendency for all organisms to dissipate. This idea of dissipation, of dissolving away, of gathering dust, of collapsing into a more messy, disintegrated or jungle-like state, where things seem to be rather chaotic and out of perspective. Just as you might leave your building or your garden to become infested with plants or dust, this is what will happen with any organism if it's not resisted or until a new state is achieved. So in the image, you'll see that anything can cause this kind of over-rich input of energy, including the coach herself or himself, who could be just adding more into the mix that a person finds difficult to manage. When we look at the thing as a whole, people have too much information. There's often too much data coming in from all sides that they find very hard to deal with. And this leads inevitably to a sense of perturbation and a crisis. How do we achieve a new stable or sustainable transformation from that? It depends on many, many things. But often at that point of bifurcation between chaos and balance and stability, we have choices to make. We can either let things disintegrate more and collapse into an even more difficult to manage system, or we can look for ways of transforming it into a more sustainable system. Next slide, please. In my works, I aim to make this playful and interesting in the workshop environment. We use group methods or one-to-one methods, often small group methods, where you will have observers observing how it works in a real scenario. We can video record this and play it back and look at how people have used their language and use of strategy to manage the situation better. No matter what their level, they could be at the top of the pyramid or at the very bottom of it. It doesn't really make any difference. And in any sort of matrix system, we'll find that there are relationships that are constantly having to be managed by different people at the same time, simultaneously. Well, essentially we could divide it into 3 steps. And even though I've said that it's not a goal-oriented approach or a goal theory coaching approach, there is, of course, coaching involved with this. So what I like to look at with my coachees is their real scenarios, stories that they bring with them to the meetings. I need to know what's been going on, how long that's been going on for, and we invite other people to join the workshop so that we can reenact these scenarios in new and sometimes entertaining ways. It's a safe area where it's possible to be creative and fluid and try out new things. So the 3 steps really are the setup, which is how a problem has been arrived at, successfully or unsuccessfully. Then the moment of crisis or the period or state of crisis that the person may have found themselves in, or in which the organization may currently find itself in, due to, as I was saying, due to the overrich environment or due to other destabilizing factors. Destabilizing factors could include a new political environment, news or an announcement, a new legal framework, a takeover by another organization, a new set of management strategies, all kinds of things that will tend to add to a sense of destabilization and disorientation. And it's within that phase, this central phase, that people tend to view one another as victims and aggressors. So looking at how to manage that and what outcomes are available is where we get to the outcomes-based approach and the lingua management approach. Next slide, please. So possibly you'll find this difficult to read, but there would be all kinds of potential scenarios for practice where we try these out. And I encourage people to prepare and then present a scenario that they are living with or trying to find sense out of, so that we can then reenact this and simulate this in different ways. As I was saying at the beginning, the familiar picture is the Hegelian dialectic, where we have a thesis, an antithesis, a crisis, and then a synthesis that comes out of it. And it's very much along the same lines as this. What I've noticed is that there are different stages within a person's experience of dealing with this overrich data environment, where they either will feel demotivated, they will feel destabilized, they will feel disempowered, or they will feel literally in a state of complete crisis and not knowing which way to go, or they will feel that they are being normalized into new ways of being that they are perhaps unready for and unable to manage within their normal framework. Next slide, please. So this is one potential way of looking at it, managing uncertainty. And this summarizes, I think, what I've said so far. And it explains the relationship between individuals and organizations. It explains how when normality breaks down due to some kind of external force, we then collapse into a period of very difficult experiences, because the system itself has a tendency to dissolve and to disrupt itself unless it's kept going by people who are able to view with better awareness what's going on. And this is why at the beginning I was talking about self-mastery and the idea of a readjustment of perspective to look at what really matters. In a sense, we're talking about a generative approach where there are emerging insights, where there isn't a specific goal or focus of attainment or of a virtuous outcome that we're looking for, but an emerging insight or an emerging awareness of what's really going on at a deeper level. And this therefore implies self-concordance, a congruence with oneself and with others, which is very difficult to attain, which is what the workshops are aiming to do. So the negative spiral is what we, of course, are trying to avoid, the downward spiral. So next slide, please. The positive spiral is what we're aiming to achieve, which is arrived at through working together with the organization and with the client and with that person's team to overcome the feelings of demotivation, destabilization, crisis, or normalization. Next slide, please. I'll move quickly through to the end.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be as quick as I can. So one of the things that we need to be aware of is embodied self-awareness, social awareness, and self-management and social management. And there are many ways of doing this. Next slide. I work using language, obviously, and language which can be totally new, is very liberating, involves bridging techniques and amplification techniques, which frees us from the inner terrorist and from the pitfalls of hidden narratives or what's been called, predetermined rights and wrongs. And last slide. We work from the bottom up. A lot of coaching models, of course, use these open question techniques, but I always work from the bottom up, from the framework to the context, before I reach more difficult questions of strategy, belief, and identity, which are much more sensitive. And I always tend to avoid the question of why, because I find that why will once again destabilize people into identifying wrongly with false narratives. Therefore, we go back to the beginning and work again from the framework. And that's it. Thank you. Final slide just summarizes all the very many different aspects of my work, from working with teams, with sports people, with groups, with organizations, and with individuals. That's it. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Peter.
Any questions? You may want these to be brief, so please tell me about what sort of time limits we have.
A few minutes if somebody has a question.
I realise it could be an unfamiliar concept in terms of the chaodynamics.
Hi, Peter. I have a question.
Hi there.
Raju, can you see me? My camera's off.
I can hear your voice.
All right. So the question is, this whole concept, these theories put together, KO and lingual management, Chaodynamics and lingual management. Is this your own, or is this coming from some other sources?
No, this is all original research and original work. It is inspired by Count Ilya Prigozhin and his work with physics. I came across it mainly when I was working in Belgium, because I was working on workshops in Belgium and with people from ESHEC, the business school there. So I started to learn more about this concept and how it could be developed into a language management approach. And I was involved in using concepts like this with some other people in order to develop an embodied approach, which I've now taken on into my own business and which I work on from the UK.
Okay, thank you. So is this going to turn into a book or something?
Well, I've published some articles on it because I'm also an English teacher or an English trainer, a business English trainer in English Training Professional, ET Professional, if you know that. And I can make the links available. And in International Coaching News, which is an online coaching news magazine.
All right. Well, when you do come up with a book, please sign me up for it.
Sure, yeah, I'm certainly hoping to write one at some point, but these things take time, don't they? But I've certainly got some ideas for it. Thank you for your encouragement. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you very much, both. I will be happy to share the articles, Peter, with everyone after the presentation. So, yeah, you can
thank you.
Okay. Thank you. This was lovely. And now we can organically move to Raju.